have Ebola. I have Ebola.
That would be such a... Is that your attention getter?
No, that's not it.
That was wrong. Yeah, that's
I have Ebola and you all have it as well. Okay. I want everyone in here to imagine waking up with a cough or a sore throat. Now, of course, you pass this off as a cold and you go on with your typical day. But in the next few days, you start experiencing vomiting and a fever. So you go to your doctor and they diagnose it as a flu. Reasonable assumption since flu season is coming up. But your next few days are unbearable. You have bloody diarrhea and your abdomen feels like it's about to explode. And you're bleeding from your eyes, nose, ears, and gums. You go back to the doctor and they say you have Ebola. And you have about 48 hours left to live. And there's nothing they can do about it. If you haven't been watching the news lately, then this story that I just had to imagine is a harsh reality for some people all over the world, and even here in the United States. But if it's so deadly, how do we know so little about it? And why are we just hearing about it now if the first case was all the way back in December of 2015? I have one theory that many documentaries, journals, and articles support that have evidence. Both my parents work in hospitals, and they have patients calling them all hours of the day, worried that they will become the next victim of Ebola. And we all even received an email from the Office of the Provost about Ebola and the travel updates. Today, I will tell you the real reason why Ebola cannot be stopped and why thousands are suffering from something that supposedly cannot be controlled. The United States government, along with the CDC, harvested Ebola in the 1970s in order to control rapid population growth. But first, let me give you some history into the disease and about it. Now, this all comes from NOVA, which is a branch of PBS that specializes in medical publications and health, and they had a documentary called Surviving Ebola. So the first outbreak brings us to Antwerp, Belgium in 1776, when Dr. Peter Piot received a vial of blood from a small village in the Congo. When they looked at it under a microscope, they saw this. This is Ebola. Later on, 15 of the Belgian nurses died there in the Congo. It was named after the Ebola river that flowed next to the mission area. So the disease, and these statistics come from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control's website, cdc.gov. To catch it, you have to come into contact with someone who has been affected or who has died from the disease, their bodily fluids. The original symptoms start out as the flu, which make it so hard to diagnose, and it has an incubation period of about 21 days. So it latches onto the host cells and reproduces at a rapid rate, and it infects the lining of blood vessels and organs. So you start to internally bleed and your vital organs start failing one by one. If you haven't started treatment by the time the bleeding starts, it's a guarantee that you are going to die. And the typical average lifespan of someone who starts the flu symptoms to when they die is about 12 days. So in the next slide, you see here, this is what they do to you after you have succumbed to Ebola. It's pretty extreme. But since the 1970s, there have been less than 5 Ebola outbreaks, all contained to Africa. But today, for some reason, the outbreak has spread to France, the UK, and even the United States, which brings me to our outbreak today. We are currently in the worst Ebola epidemic in history. The first outbreak, all combined with the ones before 2014, had a combined total of 2,000 deaths. Well, we're already well above double of that. The first case was in December 6, 2013, when a small New Guinea African child and his entire family died from the disease. CNN posted on their website fun facts, or not really fun, but facts about Ebola, just in case you were concerned. So 4,900 have died from Ebola today, since the outbreak in December, and there have been over 10,000 cases reported. But with international travel and volunteers, it's just made it worse. You have all the people coming out of Africa, going back to their home countries because they're concerned they're going to get it. So it was only a matter of time before it broke the borders of Africa. So France, Great Britain, Germany, Spain, Norway, and the US are currently dealing with cases. Now the New York Times also did kind of what CNN did. They posted a huge thing on their website called "Where are the most new cases being reported?" And it said that the US is currently dealing with 9 Ebola cases, and they've all been confirmed. The first being with Thomas Duncan, and this is the path that he took after he left Liberia where he was volunteering. So 30% of you in the survey that I gave you were concerned that you could catch Ebola, and 2 of you have loved ones in a location where Ebola has been diagnosed. So it's very real, and we should all be afraid because, I mean, it's relevant to all of us. But news stations like CNN, Fox, and ABC have run stories that the CDC is taking care of the situation, but we keep hearing more and more cases every day. Now, Tom Kathman published an article called The New World Order Biowar, which he is a member of the Project Chesapeake, which is a conspiracy organization that believes that the US government is plotting against citizens. So, in it, he says that this is no coincidence. They've been harvesting Ebola since the 1970s, so the elite can take control of like the little resources that are dwindling down, like oil. The vaccine already exists, but the CDC is hiding it, so you have to pay millions in order to obtain it. It wasn't until 15 weeks after the first reported case that the epidemic was actually confirmed. So Dr. Ingrid Damon of the CDC goes on record saying there was a delay in being able to effectively recognize it and respond to it. So even if you don't believe conspiracy, the CDC is still very largely to blame for the outbreak and what it's come to so far. In the survey I gave you, 50% of you said you would quarantine infected people, and maybe that took you a minute to come to that answer. Well, on October 25th, the CDC finally started imposing a 21-day quarantine, a whole month after Thomas was entered into the United States. So the CDC is based in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Anthony Fasai, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease at the National Institute for Health, stated that, "I'm concerned with the disincentive for healthcare workers, so like there won't be any motive, so they're still sending US volunteers." But in the same article, the Pentagon would not say whether it's willing to start sending active duty military Ebola response teams. But you just gave the okay to send health workers, but you're not going to send the military? Especially when the CDC's policy for when an epidemic outbreak occurs is to impose martial law. That way nobody enters in or out of the area where the diseases come. And then the origin. Nobody knows how the actual Ebola virus showed up. They said the environment was randomly right for it to start spreading. They maybe think it was because of the fruit bats that the indigenous people consume. But if that's the case, then a lot more people would have it, since it's a custom for people in that area to like eat fruit bats, other animals that are around them. And a huge coincidence, Liberia has the worst outbreak with 6,000 cases. The United States created Liberia in the 1820s. So any one of us could be a victim, and it's continuing to bring foreign victims into the United States. But if the media and the US population don't want any more people, why are you still bringing in patients, especially if they're not US citizens? So, in conclusion, maybe it's just a coincidence that the United States owns Liberia and it has the most cases. Maybe it's a coincidence that out of all the countries outside of the continent of Africa, we have the most cases. Maybe it's a coincidence that Africa, that the CDC thinks it's a good idea to bring in foreign people. A lot of coincidences for a medical disaster. My goal here today is to tell you that this is no medical disaster, that we are currently in a biowar with the United States, and that Ebola is just a smokescreen to control population rapid growth. Thank you.